In a peaceful street corner where Sakamoto's convenience store stood, two boys were hotly debating a strange object on the sidewalk, which one of them insisted was alien droppings, while a mysterious figure quietly observed from afar. Inside, a silver-haired old woman was leisurely slurping down a bowl of noodles, enjoying her meal amidst the fully stocked shelves. Rumors spoke of a glorious era long past, where Sakamoto Taro, a man with silver hair tied in a bun and a cigarette on his lips, was once hailed as a living legend in the underworld of assassins. Amidst the chaotic city, a group of black-suited bodyguards recognized Sakamoto with horror and immediately shouted to each other to open fire and pursue him. In a flash, Sakamoto glided like the wind through the narrow corridor, his blade swiftly taking down his adversaries before they could even pull the trigger. Standing amidst the scattered bodies after the bloody aftermath, the living legend casually disparaged his enemies as truly despicable, while a witness could only scream in terror. He was once a master whom all assassins respected, and his juniors always yearned to fight alongside him. But one day, everything changed. Back in the present, at a quiet convenience store, an elderly customer placed their shopping basket on the counter and was warmly greeted by the young employee. Sakamoto cried out in utter anguish, declaring that someone had been forsaken by Cupid, causing his glasses to crack from the shock. Sakamoto shocked the underworld when he decided to hang up his weapons, despite fierce opposition from various factions, simply to marry the woman he loved. His happiness was made complete when his first child was born, marking the important milestone of starting a family in his ordinary life. And so, the peaceful days with his family transformed the former assassin legend into a portly, round-bellied uncle, looking not unlike a giant capybara. In the suburbs of Tokyo, a young blonde man named Shin finally found Sakamoto's convenience store after days of searching for the man he longed to meet. Inside the store, the plump shopkeeper politely asked the customer to wait a moment from behind the cash register. A mischievous boy was trying to win a free juice with his toy, leaving Sakamoto, the owner, exasperated, while his wife Aoi playfully teased the kid about his missed shot. The kid refused to give up, even after tumbling sprawling and sending his books and papers flying, stubbornly insisting on taking another shot. The clumsiness caused an ink bottle to spill onto the floor and stain a man's white pants, and he immediately flew into a rage, grabbing the boy to scold him. The aggressive man not only threatened the boy but also turned to assault a young employee, causing those around to panic at this senseless aggression. Suddenly, a brutal piercing strike with a sharp object to the young man's neck caused a gush of blood, creating a horrifying scene right in the middle of the store. It turned out that was just an imagination. In reality, Sakamoto merely stood stunned while the boy profusely thanked him, and the rude man clicked his tongue and walked away, finding the scene too bizarre. Sakamoto broke out in a cold sweat, telling himself that his killer instinct had almost led him to eliminate the customer, a reaction he had fully anticipated. However, the blonde-haired young man sitting at the counter had seen everything, realizing with astonishment that Sakamoto had just intended to take a life with nothing but a ballpoint pen. The young man named Shin, a psychic assassin, stepped forward to greet the man he hadn't seen in a long time, but Sakamoto seemed to need a reminder of his identity. Immediately, a mighty punch from the old shop owner landed squarely on Shin's face, sending him flying back, blood gushing from his nose for daring to cause trouble. Shin frantically yelled, questioning why she wanted to eliminate him right after meeting, while the employee next to him explained to everyone that Shin could read minds. Outside on the peaceful street, passers-by buzzed with rumors that the mysterious convenience store owner was actually a retired figure from the underworld. Shin tried to persuade Sakamoto to return to the path of an assassin, asserting that a living legend being stuck in this place was a terrible waste of talent. Faced with a blunt refusal, Shin sank into memories of the old days, when the name Sakamoto was a terror that made every thug bow down. Shin couldn't believe that the man who once ate with disciplined restraint was now slurping instant noodles with relish, his current image so different from the legend in his memory. As Shin lit a cigarette and made a disparaging remark about Sakamoto's appearance, he was suddenly stunned to see the cigarette on his lips cleanly severed in an instant. Sakamoto continued to calmly slurp his noodles with one hand, the other holding the utility knife he had just used to remind Shin about the store's no-smoking policy. Shin broke out in a cold sweat, realizing Sakamoto's terrifying speed was still intact. Hearing him warn that even if he had gotten fat, dealing with Shin would be as easy as snapping his fingers. Instead of continuing the tense conversation, Sakamoto asked Shin for a favor, leaving the blonde-haired young man bewildered, thinking he was about to eliminate someone. It turned out that the deadly mission was just helping a neighbor trim some high branches, and Shin reluctantly lent a hand. Sakamoto continued to pull Shin into a series of mundane tasks, from coaxing a picky eater to retrieving a ball for crying children. Shin angrily yelled that he wasn't there to be a babysitter, but then he suddenly understood that Sakamoto was trying to conceal his identity to blend into normal life. Even so, Shin couldn't accept this change and sarcastically remarked that Sakamoto's new persona was truly just a farce. Just then, a mischievous child shot a toy arrow at Shin's head, infuriating him and making him vow to return for revenge. Sitting in his car in the parking lot, Shin lit a cigarette and reflected on their 5 years apart, silently remarking that Sakamoto had truly become too soft. In Shin's mind, the image of Sakamoto standing behind him, holding a knife, still exuded a terrifying coolness that he could never forget. As he drove, Shin yelled with an unhealthy excitement about wanting to work alongside Sakamoto once more, nearly causing accidents for pedestrians. The phone's ringing interrupted his thoughts. The boss was calling to check if Shin had convinced Sakamoto to rejoin the organization. When Shin reported his failure, the voice on the other end coldly asked if he had eliminated Sakamoto as instructed, leaving Shin stunned. Looking in the rearview mirror, Shin flashed a menacing smile and wondered if it was truly necessary to dispatch Sakamoto, who was now just a harmless, overweight man. The boss reiterated the brutal rule of the assassin world. Anyone who dared to break the code and leave the syndicate faced only one path, demise, and Shin was compelled to enforce the sentence. The furious boss yelled threats, warning he would send others to deal with Shin as well if he didn't complete the mission, but Shin maintained a calm and defiant attitude. Feeling cornered, Shin slumped his head onto the steering wheel with a sigh, telling himself that if he didn't act, someone else would, so he had no choice but to end things himself. With the weapon in his hand, Shin decided it was better for him to do the deed than to let anyone else harm Sakamoto. The next day, Shin returned to the store and was warmly welcomed by the clerk, Aoi, while the children outside were still complaining of boredom. Without hesitation, Shin drew his weapon and declared he was there to fight, the loud sound startling Sakamoto, who was reading the newspaper, causing him to look up. Shin fabricated a reason, claiming he was leaving the city, to approach Sakamoto, his weapon clutched firmly, preparing for the final act. With all his reverence for his idol, Shin resolved to pull the trigger, and the bullet flew straight towards the man sitting in front of him. But Sakamoto simply spat out a cough drop, deflecting the bullet and leaving Shin's eyes wide with astonishment, unable to believe what had just happened. Shin frantically searched the entire store for Sakamoto but was completely helpless, unable to read his thoughts, while Sakamoto calmly hid in a corner. A gloved hand unexpectedly reached through the wire shelving, quietly pulling an item. Shin crashed through the shelves, shattering the glass door in pursuit. But just as he raised his weapon, Sakamoto's fist was waiting. As he charged, Shin suddenly stopped, feeling a sticky liquid on his hair. He realized it was just a stain from a broken chip bag, not blood. The intense chase continued in the convenience store. Shin realized he needed to quickly change his position to escape the persistent pursuit of the pot-bellied man. But Sakamoto was faster. He delivered a powerful punch that sent Shin flying through the shelves, creating a chaotic pile of wreckage. Shin woke up in a bed, bandaged and confused, not understanding what had happened, until he saw Sakamoto's wife and children cheer happily because he was awake. Still reeling, Shin was even more shocked when the Sakamoto family invited him to stay for dinner and kindly inquired about his dietary preferences. Sitting before a bountiful dinner table, Shin's operative instinct made him break into a sweat, wondering if the food was tainted. even though he was confident in his ability to resist harmful substances. But when he tasted it, the delicious flavor and warm family atmosphere deeply moved Shin, a sense of peace he had never known in his entire life as an operative. Witnessing Sakamoto tenderly feeding his wife, Shin suddenly understood that he had given up everything simply to protect this simple, ordinary happiness. Leaving the store, Shin secretly promised he would never trouble Sakamoto again after receiving a meaningful thank you and a see you again from the shop owner. Returning to base, Shin alone confronted the boss and the entire gang surrounding him, ready to accept the repercussions of his failure. Faced with the boss's disappointment and fury that Sakamoto was still alive, Shin could only bow his head and silently endure. Despite the crowd's mockery, Shin knelt on the ground, pleading with the boss to let Sakamoto continue living a normal life. The boss coldly rejected him, asserting that Sakamoto was the one who broke the rules first, so his demise was a fitting punishment, while Shin still tried to reason, mentioning Sakamoto's family. To save his hero, Shin decided to take all responsibility upon himself and pointed a weapon at his own head to end his life, considering it the ultimate atonement. The long-haired man coldly issued a cruel command, forcing his opponent to end their own life in exchange for another's. However, deep down, extreme contempt surged within him. He secretly cursed the enemy's foolishness, for he had no intention of forgiving. Shin coldly aimed his weapon forward, his sharp gaze unwavering as if he had anticipated everything. He calmly confirmed the order, showing no surprise at the turn of events. Realizing his opponent could read minds, the long-haired leader frantically ordered his subordinates to attack immediately to gain an advantage. Meanwhile, Shin tightened his resolute gaze, telling himself he had no choice but to confront them directly. Outside Sakamoto's convenience store, an old man thoughtfully listened to the chaotic sounds of gunfire and explosions echoing from afar. He seemed to be contemplating something amidst this sudden tense situation. The weapon shop owner calmly locked the cash register and stepped into the secret armory behind it. His face became stern as he equipped himself with a heavy-caliber weapon, ready for an impending conflict. Shin panted, hiding behind cover, worriedly realizing his weapon was running low on ammunition and the enemy seemed to anticipate his every move. On the other side, the bearded man calmly reassured his comrades, exposing Shin's weakness. His mind-reading ability would be useless if they got close. Making a risky decision, Shin charged out of cover, moving agilely while firing accurately at the enemy. Though hit by a shot and falling backward, the bald man stubbornly returned fire, creating a breathtaking exchange of fire. After delivering a counterkick and taking down one opponent, Shin froze, realizing he was surrounded by 3 enemies aiming their weapons at him. He broke into a cold sweat, inwardly lamenting that the situation had truly become dire. In the midst of the peril, Sakamoto suddenly appeared and coldly used a stun weapon to incapacitate numerous operatives in the blink of an eye. Witnessing such overwhelming power, Shin could only stare in astonishment and utter his name. Realizing Sakamoto's presence, the bearded boss frantically shouted an alarm to his comrades. Ignoring the trembling, frightened hostages, the entire gang immediately aimed their weapons and charged to attack this legendary target. When the man in the black suit pointed a gun at him, Sakamoto reacted with lightning speed, knocking his weapon away and immediately closing in. He aimed the gun back at the enemy's hip, filling him with extreme terror. The attacker was stunned as his punch missed, hitting only air, due to the old man's incredible speed. Refusing to accept defeat, he frantically drew a knife and lunged forward to strike from behind with intense hostile intent. But Sakamoto easily spun around and delivered a powerful slap to the sneak attacker's face, so forceful that the knife in his hand flew far away. The remaining thugs panicked, reminding each other not to attack individually, but as soon as one's gun jammed, Sakamoto seized the opportunity to hurl knives at them with lethal precision. The severely injured thugs writhed on the floor, continuously cursing Sakamoto's name. Witnessing Sakamoto fighting fiercely in his apron, Shin was so stunned he couldn't utter a word. After defeating all enemies, Sakamoto Taro stood tall in the middle of the warehouse, cracking his shoulder joints. His figure exuded the overwhelming aura of a legendary assassin from a bygone era. When Shin asked in surprise how he managed to find them, Sakamoto merely looked at him silently with a scrutinizing gaze. The answer lay in the pistol he held in his hand, which seemed to conceal a secret. Sakamoto expertly disassembled the gun, revealing a tiny listening chip inside. Shin was stunned to realize his boss had secretly attached a tracking device to him since yesterday, proving he had never truly let his guard down. His eyes gleaming with determination, Shin clenched his fists and promised himself that from this day forward, he had made an important decision for his life. Shin bent down to look at the blue uniform lying on the floor, wondering if it would be easy to move in. However, he suddenly paused in surprise when he noticed an unusual detail. Boss Sakamoto casually calculated the meager salary and strict overtime conditions, leaving Shin gaping in astonishment, unable to believe he was being exploited so terribly. While Sakamoto calmly stirred drinks behind the counter, the blond young man stood dazed, looking distraught. At the same time, a mischievous boy in a hat darted past, chasing a ball rolling across the floor. Shin grimaced uncomfortably when he saw Boss Sakamoto nonchalantly slurping his ramen loudly, splashing broth onto his brand-new apron. He grumbled, asking his boss to eat a bit more politely. Wondering why the ramen wasn't selling well, Shin suddenly blushed crimson when the black-haired woman appeared and complimented him on looking very fitting in his apron. She cheerfully ordered a large bowl of ramen, making the young man incredibly flustered. Hearing the old woman's thoughts as she fumbled for laundry detergent, Shin quickly grabbed the product and handed it to her before she could even speak. This unexpected understanding left the elderly customer both surprised and profusely grateful. While the shop owner's daughter praised his customer service skills, the boy in the yellow hat secretly compared her beauty to the pot-bellied boss. Hearing that impertinent thought, Shin immediately glared at the boy, threatening him. As he arranged the merchandise, Shin told himself this job was still better than being an assassin, even if he sometimes had no idea what he was doing. Just then, the accompanying boy innocently turned to ask the older man if working there was fun. When asked about his past, Sakamoto vaguely recounted a story about someone who spoke out of turn and was dealt with completely, making Shin break out in a cold sweat. He quickly agreed with his boss's implicitly threatening story about the harshness of society. And just like that, Sakamoto accepted becoming an apprentice once more. The cry of "Welcome, esteemed customers," rang out, marking the beginning of his tumultuous days as both a convenience store employee and an apprentice. A week had passed since Shin abandoned the path of an assassin to work at the convenience store. Deep down, he couldn't help but admire his boss's incredibly cool, fighting moment from that day. Shin excitedly prattled on about his boss's supreme close combat skills, asserting that he was still unmatched despite his retirement. Shin next to him also nodded in approval, while Sakamoto Taro calmly read the newspaper and urged everyone to get back to work. Sakamoto Aoi shrieked in panic, her face flushed with anger and worry. She fiercely questioned her husband, strictly forbidding any intention of returning to the perilous path of an assassin that he had promised to abandon. The old man with glasses whispered to reassure Shin that he had acted gently, avoiding vital points. However, both were stunned when the black-haired girl coldly reminded them that she knew all the tricks and household rules of this family by heart. With fiery eyes, the black-haired girl pointed directly at her opponent's face and delivered a stern ultimatum. If the household rules were violated, she would immediately divorce him. She emphasized each word, making the atmosphere extremely tense. After the black-haired girl stormed off in a huff, Shin scratched his head and turned to ask the shop owner what that terrifying household rule actually was. The owner was still in shock, sweating profusely. Suddenly, Sakamoto lunged and seized Shin from behind, pressing a sharp object against his throat. The swift action left Shin only able to gasp in pain and surprise. Shin clutched his head and yelled in indignation, scolding the professor for always having thoughts of elimination in his mind. The old man glared at him, secretly thinking the kid should talk less nonsense, while Shin's mind-reading ability was precisely what made him constantly endure those dark currents of thought. On the street, The short-haired girl sighed regretfully for having spoken harshly to her boyfriend that morning. Her friend kindly comforted her. While at a nearby bus stop, passengers waved goodbye to loved ones on the bus that had just started moving. While sweeping in front of the shop, Shin encountered an elderly police officer cycling on patrol. The officer recognized him as an employee at Sakamoto's house and stopped to exchange a few pleasantries. Hearing the elderly police officer warn about rampant robberies, Shin confidently puffed out his chest, boasting that this convenience store was the safest place in Japan. Standing behind him, the elderly shop owner could only shake his head in exasperation at his employee's excessive bragging. After scoffing at the delivery person's excessive caution, Shin took the package from the elderly shop owner to deliver it. He continued to joke about robberies, completely unaware that real trouble was lurking ahead. The atmosphere on the bus suddenly became suffocating as the masked robbers drew their weapons and took control of all the passengers. The leader of the robbers aggressively announced they were seizing control of the bus and threatened to eliminate anyone who dared to make a move, terrifying everyone. In this precarious situation, the black-haired schoolgirl paid no mind to the robbers, instead worrying intensely because the ice cream in her bag was about to melt. She wondered if she should take out the ice cream and eat it right then, ignoring the muzzles of the weapons pointed at her. Hanging a closed sign on the shop to go deliver, the two master and apprentice rode their motorcycle down the road. When the passenger on the motorcycle curiously asked about the content of the household rules, the motorcycle driver sighed and said there were countless rules, and he should just use his mind-reading ability to memorize them himself. While speeding along, the motorcycle suddenly jolted violently, sending the crate of apples from the back scattering across the road. Shin flinched and looked back, astonished to see the fruits of his labor falling everywhere. Before the motorcycle driver could understand what was happening, the elderly man slammed on the brakes, his face paling with alarm. He had just realized that Aoi, his boss's wife, was on that hijacked bus. On the bus, the frantic robbers revealed their ridiculous terrorist motive. They intended to drive the bus straight into the publishing house building to avenge the cancellation of their favorite manga series. The bus sped off amidst the desperation of the fanatics. While the robber was prattling on about sacrificing passenger lives for the manga industry, Aoi was wistfully regretting not making it home in time to cook dinner. Her strangely calm demeanor made the criminal pause in confusion. Suddenly, Aoi smiled brightly, certain that that person had arrived to rescue her. While the robbers were still bewildered, thinking this hostage had gone mad from fear, the distant roar of a motorcycle engine signaled the arrival of reinforcements. As he drove closer to the target, Shin seriously reiterated the mission's two top priorities: safe rescue and absolute secrecy of identity. However, he received a surprisingly negative response from behind him. The man in the hat added a supreme rule to the mission list: absolutely no taking of lives. He sternly emphasized that they were no longer permitted to end anyone's existence. The helmeted young man admitted he had vaguely noticed this change in his boss since the previous battle. When he wondered why an enforcer would try to avoid lethal actions, the white helmet man remained silent, his pensive gaze concealing a profound past. Memories returned to 5 years ago, amidst the cold falling snow. Sakamoto Aoi was shocked to see bloodstains on Sakamoto Taru's neck and angrily accused him of having just taken a life again. Sakamoto, holding a gift box, calmly replied that he had just returned from work as if it were the most normal thing in the world. The young woman brushed aside the gift, crying out that she didn't need things bought with money tainted by violence. She painfully questioned his conscience, leaving the man in the gray coat standing alone in the snow with a bewildered expression. Unable to endure it any longer, Vin turned and walked away, leaving a heartbreaking declaration. If Sakamoto wouldn't change that violent path, then their relationship would have to end here. Just then, a horrific accident occurred. Sakamoto was utterly terrified as he witnessed the cloaked girl falling freely from above, while he observed and ran with frightening speed. Despite the danger, Sakamoto launched himself into the air, quickly embracing the young woman to protect her before they both fell amidst the chaotic debris. Fortunately, the thick layer of snow saved both their lives. Aoi recovered, trembling in disbelief that she had survived the deadly fall, while the sharp crashing sounds from the explosion site still echoed around them. Still reeling from fear, Aoi hugged Sakamoto from behind and burst into sobs. She choked out a question, asking if he could bear it if she were truly no longer in his life today. The emotional question was like a splash of cold water in Sakamoto's face, jolting him awake. He realized that out there, everyone had precious loved ones to protect, just as he cherished her. In the silent expanse of white snow, Aoi knelt, looking deep into Sakamoto's eyes and earnestly pleading for a promise of change, a promise to end the days of senseless violence. With a smudged face but an unprecedented determined gaze, Black Aoi raised his hand and solemnly swore to the woman he loved that he would never again take anyone's life. The old advice about living for others to atone for past mistakes still echoed in his mind. Back in the present, Aoi smiled, recalling her recklessness that day, while Sakamoto could only offer a happy, wry smile. Returning to the rescue mission, the bearded man reminded Shin one last time about the non-lethal rule and to maintain telepathic contact. Immediately after, their motorcycle soared into the air, performing a spectacular jump over the speeding bus. The screeching brakes on the bus roof startled the robbers inside, who looked at each other in confusion, not understanding what was happening above their heads. The chubby colleague frantically urged Sakamoto to pull his jacket over his face to avoid revealing their identities, as they currently looked exactly like professional troublemakers preparing to infiltrate. But alas, as soon as they noticed the height limit sign ahead, they both realized with a shock that they were sitting precariously on the bus roof and were about to collide with the underside of a bridge. In that split second of extreme peril, a lightning-fast figure shot past, creating a chaotic collision on the bus roof. Shin only had time to scream as everything around them turned upside down. A powerful impact sent someone flying off the bus roof and onto the road. Shin screamed his boss's name in horror, fearing that his clumsy superior had met with an accident. It turned out Sakamoto had cleverly executed a spectacular landing to block the front of the bus. The children playing nearby watched with wide-eyed admiration, exclaiming excitedly at the cool action of the stranger. A hooded figure suddenly crashed straight through the shattered glass window, sending shards flying everywhere. This abrupt appearance left the masked man stunned speechless, while the student behind him cowered in terror. Using the momentum from swinging on the bus handle, the protagonist in blue delivered a powerful kick straight to the assailant's rear, making him double over in agony. Shin quickly subdued the masked individual with a dangerous joint lock, coldly threatening to break his arm if he didn't stop the vehicle immediately, despite the man's screams of pain. While the driver frantically cried for help, his leg chained to the accelerator pedal, the attacker was also stunned to discover the pile of iron chains before angrily pulling the masked person up. The out-of-control bus swayed wildly, forcing passengers to risk jumping out, but Sakamoto, however, charged forward resolutely, a no-entry sign in hand, confidently declaring he would handle the situation. The man with the headband used the signpost to smash the windshield, then continued to assault the rapidly moving vehicle's body, terrifying the driver and passengers inside with the violent impacts. Right at the shattered front of the bus, Sakamoto suddenly appeared, signpost in hand, startling even the passengers who had their backs turned. The chaotic crowd screamed and fled in extreme fear, while Sakamoto urged everyone to hurry, and Shin ran, bewildered, wondering who this troublemaker was. Among the black-clad figures sprawled on the floor, Shin calmly checked their condition, as the old man inquired, while Aoi smiled brightly, asserting she was never afraid, certain that he would come to rescue her. With a flustered and apologetic expression, Aoi hesitantly apologized for her disrespectful attitude towards him that morning. Sakamoto held the mask high and began to loudly remind them of the 12th rule in the family code. Aoi playfully made him promise to treat her to a grand meal, but then, choked with emotion, she tightly grasped the man's hand, earnestly pleading with him to live for others from now on. The news reported that the bus hijacking had been safely thwarted by a mysterious force. Meanwhile, at Sakamoto's store, a lavish feast was already laid out. Experts speculated that the mysterious hero might be a master martial artist. But the true identity of the masked man speeding through the streets remained a big question mark. The shop owner and Shin had just breathed a sigh of relief, thinking the mask had helped conceal his identity, when suddenly a child pointed directly at the owner and exclaimed that he looked exactly like the hero, leaving both of them frozen. Shin recounted the story of the boss hanging up his sword and washing his blade, leaving the silver-haired manager bewildered. It turned out those were the very words the owner had been muttering all the way home. Accepting the new member, shop owner Sakamoto handed Shin the family code handbook and demanded that he memorize it immediately, as he was now part of the family. The first rule, no taking lives, was met with strong resistance, but was immediately quelled by a cold warning that anyone who broke the rule would have their heads smashed. Shin narrowed his eyes in intense focus, carefully calculating the wind direction and distance before aiming his gun directly at the unsuspecting target. At the fair's shooting gallery, despite aiming very carefully, Shin still failed miserably, resignedly listening as the attendant called out the next customer's name. The shop owner relentlessly mocked Shin's shooting skills, then carried off a huge sack of prizes, leaving the resentful employee to blame his crummy gun. When reminded by police officer Nakase about illegal parking, Sakamoto was not only unafraid but lectured her in return about adults needing to set an example, while the young man with him just mumbled explanations. Holding a flyer seeking the mysterious masked man, Shin couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment at the circulating information. The police officer excitedly recounted the rumor that the masked hero had saved an entire bus, prompting the two men to feign extreme surprise to go along with her story. Unexpectedly, the police officer erupted in a fit of rage, vowing to capture that hero by any means because she could not accept his use of violence to resolve issues. Faced with the police officer's intense attitude, the shop owner and Shin broke out in a cold sweat, clicking their tongues in self-consolation that at least no one was harmed, and quickly slipped away to continue deliveries. Carelessly, the police officer wondered how she knew there were no casualties when the news hadn't been announced, causing the old man with her to flinch in fear of being exposed. As Shin tried to cover up with a hunch, the old man immediately silenced him. Just then, the police officer's radio crackled with a report of two suspicious individuals. With steely determination, the police officer vowed to make the two suspects talk, convinced that they were closely connected to the mysterious masked individual. The shop owner suddenly sped off like a flash, leaving Shin to frantically chase after him, shouting for him to stop in the crowded street. Sakamoto darted past the shops, quickly paying and receiving his food in the blink of an eye, leaving the bewildered townspeople wondering about his abundant energy. The police officer stood bewildered in the peaceful neighborhood, having completely lost track of the target who had vanished as if evaporated from the earth. Disguised as display statues eating dango to shake off the police, the two men held their breath as a child pointed at them, while the girl in the hat seemed to have a sudden realization. As soon as the girl ran past, the shop owner slowly got up, covered in food, angrily brandishing a cooking spatula at his employee who was pale with fear. Sakamoto kicked away a pack of chopsticks, which greatly astonished Shin. Imagining herself a ninja dodging traps, the police officer leaped high but landed right in a puddle of wet paint, embarrassingly realizing her own foolishness. While the children whispered about the clumsy woman in pink who spilled the paint, the male student ran past with a disgruntled expression, vowing to make those responsible pay dearly. To silence the shop owner, the group reluctantly bought dozens of grilled skewers, causing Shin to complain to the heavens as he ate, his stomach already full. Returning with a disappointed expression for having lost track of the target, Nakase was kindly comforted and encouraged by the older police officer, who told her she had done very well, and also inquired about her new assignment. Seeing the young police officer cheerful again, the old man couldn't help but wonder why someone as excellent as her would agree to leave headquarters to work in this peaceful provincial town. Nakase wistfully shared that her reason for staying was a past kindness from someone, a story that seemed to awaken a memory in Shin, who was secretly listening. The young, enthusiastic police officer declared her desire to help everyone, just like her idol, then cheerfully bid farewell to the convenience store owner, who advised her not to overexert herself, while two familiar figures quietly observed from the alley. While on one last patrol for peace of mind, the police officer suddenly heard frantic screams and was stunned to discover a child being cornered by a group of thugs in broad daylight. The police officer intervened decisively, demanding the bearded man release the girl, but he only responded with a defiant attitude and a sneering smile, showing contempt for law enforcement. A strange sound echoed as someone accidentally crushed a bag of white powder on the ground, drawing the attention of the girl in the green hat, who bent down to inspect it with suspicion. The family's cozy dinner was suddenly disturbed by loud noises from the street, and while the old man calmly enjoyed his chicken, the doorbell unexpectedly rang, signaling a visitor. The old police officer knocked on Sakamoto's door with a worried expression, inquiring about the police officer Nakase, who had been missing since noon, surprising the household who thought she was just busy playing somewhere. Little Nana excitedly recounted a fond memory of Officer Nakase, who had once carried her on her back and bought her ice cream to comfort her when she got separated from her mother, moving everyone around them. Nakase's excessive enthusiasm made the police chief uneasy, while Shin turned to ask the boss for his opinion, awaiting a decision from the man deep in thought. Using the excuse of exercising to digest their meal, Sakamoto and Shin implicitly understood each other, ready to embark on a rescue mission. Tied tightly to a chair, the police officer angrily questioned her captor, but the man named Kanehira Riki casually exhaled cigarette smoke, coldly declaring that she would pay the price for having seen his merchandise. Despite the criminal's mockery about owning a gun but not using it, the police officer firmly asserted her principle of never pointing a weapon at civilians. The thugs laughed mockingly, ridiculing the girl's naivety for daring to try and apprehend an entire aggressive gang unarmed. From the top of the utility pole, Shin quickly located the police officer and the thugs at the abandoned factory, immediately reporting the urgent situation to his superior. Even though she herself was in danger, the police officer extended her arms to shield two young girls, despite the leader hurling insults that someone as weak as her couldn't protect anyone. Two small spherical objects suddenly clattered across the floor, signaling an impending intervention. A thick cloud of green smoke erupted, enveloping the space, causing everyone to panic and cough violently as their visibility was obscured. Amidst the hazy smoke, two men were extremely startled to discover uninvited guests, exclaiming in utter surprise and confusion. The blonde thug was suddenly attacked from the shadows. He gasped in pain, his face contorted before he could understand what was happening. Through the eerie green smoke, the observer was stunned to see two shadowy figures, like monsters, slowly emerging, spreading extreme terror. Receiving precise instructions on the enemy's location, the man in blue still grumbled about his visibility being completely restricted by the dense fog. The ambush happened in a flash, giving the group of thugs no time to react. One by one they were taken down in the chaos, while the hooded figure tried to listen for movement to pinpoint the opponent's position. Like a whirlwind, the older man charged left and right, using both broken chairs and fists to subdue the thugs, terrifying them. The attacker in blue moved lightning fast, unleashing powerful blows that took down numerous opponents in the blink of an eye, leaving the scene strewn with defeated foes. As the smoke cleared, the commotion died down, leaving the blindfolded policewoman standing bewildered amidst the groans of pain from the thugs lying scattered on the ground. Cornered, the cowardly leader blamed the policewoman, then threw a punch to force a path and escape, leaving her to fall with the chair. Amidst the tense situation, the man in blue was shocked to realize a startling truth. His superior was not wearing a mask to conceal their identity as planned. The imposing figure of silver-haired Sakamoto emerged from the hazy smoke, making the man in the black hat look up and gasp, wondering about the identity of this mysterious savior. Witnessing the extraordinary speed of the man who had just flashed past, both the old man and the young man were stunned, while the girl in the hat tried to call out but only managed to see the streaks of light left behind. Under the full, bright moon, two figures plunged into the night to escape, leaving behind unanswered questions before peaceful dawn broke again at Sakamoto's store. Shin stood stunned, holding a broom, wondering if the old man had burned off all his calories yesterday, given his greedy eating today. He couldn't help but be shocked as he watched the old man praise and devour a hot dog bun, asking himself if that insatiable eating habit had returned after just one day. The old male officer looked worriedly at the young female officer, wondering if she was hyperactive, while the girl shouted loudly into the phone, full of resentment. The girl vented the pent-up anger in her chest, blaming herself for being nothing but a troublesome burden yesterday. While the girl in the hat vaguely recognized Sakamoto as looking very familiar, on the other side, the atmosphere became noisy as the black-haired girl directly pinched Sakamoto's cheek to warn him about his uncontrolled eating habits. Shin, standing nearby, also added with a sigh of exasperation that if it weren't for that excess fat, she would look like a complete mess. Arriving at the bustling Niakita Chinatown, Sakamoto couldn't hide his awe at the grand scale of the place, a stark contrast to Shin's reluctance at having to travel so far just to stock up on goods. However, Aoi and little Hannah's words of advice still echoed in their minds, reminding them to definitely buy gifts for the whole family. The store owner eagerly boasted of his achievement in hunting down a divine, limited edition bun that only allowed 50 packs per person, making Shin, who was with him, realize with astonishment the true purpose of this trip. Suddenly from above, the red-haired girl shattered the window and launched herself into mid-air, creating a chaotic scene that made the subordinates below gasp in horror as they saw their boss act so recklessly. Shin and Sakamoto both cried out in horror, witnessing the bento box fall to the ground, completely crushed, leaving the victims slumped in utter despair because their meal was ruined. The two sat down, looking at the half-open bag of chips. Meanwhile, the girl who stepped on it fell right next to them. The man in black aggressively threatened to incapacitate the fleeing person to prevent further evasion, while the pursued person was exhausted and utterly terrified. Just then, the pink-haired girl appeared, ready for battle, signaling an impending confrontation. Lu Xiaotang confidently declared her identity in the crowded street, challenging anyone who intended to apprehend her with the defiant attitude of someone who knew no fear, making passers-by turn and stare in astonishment. Her pride quickly vanished as Lu Xiaotang was restrained from behind by the bald abductor, while his accomplice in the black vest threatened to cripple her leg with a screwdriver amidst sinister laughter. The old chef unexpectedly intervened, clamping down on the large abductor's arm with such force that the hot tongs snapped in half, leaving both the thugs and the victim stunned, while the black-haired man silently observed the situation. Without hesitation, Shin swung his briefcase, assaulting the thugs relentlessly, yelling and demanding their identities, which even surprised the vest-wearing leader observing from a distance, impressed by his fighting prowess. Seizing the opportunity, Lu Xiaotang unleashed a powerful Tai Chi strike, sending her adversary flying, leaving both Shin and Sakamoto wide-eyed with admiration for her profound martial arts skill. While Lu Xiaotang stood ready to fight amidst the chaotic scene and Shin warily carried his belongings, the old bun seller only lamented the tiny steamed bun in his hand. The enemy group panicked upon seeing people descending from the sky, mistakenly believing them to be enemy reinforcements and frantically ordered their elimination. In contrast, the bespectacled old man and his two companions looked at each other in confusion, wondering who these strange newcomers were allied with. Realizing the unfavorable situation, Sakamoto hoisted Lu Xiaotang onto his shoulder and urged Shin to run for his life, fully embracing the strategy of discretion is the better part of valor to escape. Held tightly by Sakamoto, Lu Xiaotang anxiously asked about the identities of the strangers, while Shin ran and angrily yelled, frustrated by the constant troubles that had befallen them these past few days. In another alley, the subordinate tremblingly reported to the man in the vest that the target had escaped with two strangers, and they were urgently verifying the identities of these interlopers. Boss Wang flew into a rage upon learning that the enemy had escaped despite his family having been dealt with, fearing dire consequences if he survived. The black-haired henchman immediately vented his fury on his subordinate, ordering the summoning of a special elimination squad to resolve the issue. A horrifying scene unfolded as the masked assailant coldly wielded his blade, resulting in the man's head being separated from his body, just as he managed to utter a name in despair. The masked abductor laughed cruelly as he watched the victim still trying to breathe in vain. Meanwhile, The brutal purple-robed swordsman brutally attacked those nearby, calling out to his accomplice to boast about his violent exploits. The mysterious long-haired individual sternly admonished his accomplice for his disrespectful habit of toying with the fallen, while the older man standing nearby frowned in disgust, questioning the madness of this pair of assailants. The middle-aged man, with a sweaty and ambitious face, ordered the capture of the young girl, for the key she possessed was his ticket to dominate the entire black market. The two mysterious assailants stood with their backs turned, casually discussing eliminating anyone who dared to obstruct them as if it were mere entertainment. Shin was astonished to learn that Lu Xiaotang was connected to the Lu underworld family, but the girl quickly explained that the real reason for the pursuit was the mysterious golden key she held. In the bustling street, the black-haired student loudly asserted that it was the underground treasury key entrusted to him by his parents, despite the astonishment and doubt of those around him. As Shin was in freefall and heard the suggestion to simply discard the key to escape danger, Lu Xiaotang immediately yelled in protest, determined to keep the important item despite the precarious situation. With a resolute gaze, Lu Xiaotang told herself that she could not abandon the heirloom her parents had spent their lives protecting, for if she did, she would have no face to meet them in the afterlife. The old man was stunned, wondering if the others had been eliminated or not, but only received a cold reply from Lu Xiaotang, who was flying away, warning that it was not a matter for outsiders to meddle in. Lu Xiaotang apologized profusely for dragging two strangers into trouble before letting herself fall, pulling the panicked Shin and the apron man along in a comical yet desperate situation. In a moment of surprise, the old man unexpectedly asked the girl if she knew how to make pork buns. Despite her astonishment, Lu Xiaotang honestly nodded, recalling the family recipe her late father had taught her. Shin broke out in a cold sweat, realizing his boss was truly serious about his crazy decisions, while the whole group swayed precariously amidst the tilting, crumbling buildings. Sakamoto calmly announced the postponement of the merchandise delivery, ordering Shin to prioritize protecting and assisting Lu Xiaotang, leaving Shin utterly dumbfounded. Sakamoto proposed a strange deal. He would help her resolve her troubles, in exchange for her making buns for his store, leaving Lu Xiaotang wide-eyed with surprise, wondering who these people really were. A whooshing sound startled Shin, followed immediately by Sakamoto's hurried figure racing at top speed with a mysterious man in purple, creating a scene both dramatic and humorous. The bald man in purple unleashed a terrifying punch that caused a street corner to explode, leaving the spectacled old man stunned and Shin screaming Sakamoto's name in extreme fear. Seeing the building utterly destroyed, Lu Xiaotang gritted her teeth in anger, realizing their adversaries had caught up due to their wasted time, while Shin beside her also understood that the situation had become worse than ever. The long-haired assailant reminded his associate to behave a bit more politely, but the bald assailant only responded rudely, stating that there was no need for refinement when eliminating targets. The bald man coldly ordered the elimination of the target and complained about his associate's methods of dispatching people, causing the long-haired man to retort irritably, creating a tense atmosphere between the two assailants. Shin and Lu Xiaotang shivered in horror as the victim's head revealed the disturbing truth about the twin assailants Sunhee and Bacho, individuals who found pleasure in taking lives and used victims' heads as drawing models. While the bald man was complacent about his reputation, he coldly called him an idiot, asserting that an assailant known by face and name to the public was nothing but a shameful disgrace. Shin lunged to restrain the black-haired man from behind, but he maintained an unsettling calm, coldly declaring that everything was unfolding exactly as planned. Confronted by the mysterious man's sarcastic provocation regarding his comrade's demise, Shin angrily yelled, warning him not to lay a hand on his boss. Shin gravely stated that if even Sakamoto was unaware of something, then the opponent was clearly just an amateur not worth bothering with. Lu Xiaotang struggled to parry as the masked figure swung a giant whip, attacking relentlessly, the threatening whistle of the wind signaling a perilous situation. Without a word, Sakamoto delivered a lightning-fast kick that sent the long-haired assailant flying, causing him to fall backward to the astonishment of both his associates and Lu Xiaotang, who was watching. Sakamoto continued to display terrifying power with a punch to the ground that cracked the pavement, leaving Lu shouting agape with astonishment, while the enemy in purple lay defeated at his feet. Ascending to the building's rooftop, the long-haired man's group and Shin witnessed the desolate scene after the battle, where formidable adversaries lay defeated and scattered across the cracked ground. The ceiling suddenly collapsed, revealing a large hole through which the sky was visible, leaving Lu shouting astonished as she looked at the spectacled old man and the group dusting themselves off amidst the white, flower-like debris. Despite the two assassins in purple threatening severe harm and promising a beautiful end, Lu Xiaotang clenched her fists, resolute in her choice to face demise rather than surrender the sacred memento left by her parents. The masked figure narrowed their eyes in disdain, mocking the foolishness of those who valued possessions over life, predicting a tragic end for the girl, just like her parents. Unable to endure further insults, Lu Xiaotang screamed, "Shut up!" with a face contorted in extreme fury, causing Shin beside her to frantically intervene. The old man with glasses quickly pulled Lu Xiaotang back to prevent her from acting rashly, while she cried out in anguish about her father's sacrifice to protect the family treasure. In response to her despair, the man in black coldly used a knife to sever the chain, displaying a cruel indifference. In the chaos, the old janitor accidentally caught a projectile aimed at Lu Xiaotang's forehead, causing her to flinch and clutch her head from the sudden impact. The black-haired man in purple coldly declared his intention to eliminate his opponent, but Sakamoto immediately blocked his path, sternly warning him not to arbitrarily decide the fate of others. The masked assassin duo coordinated their attack with their minced meat technique, swinging their swords to utterly dismantle the apron-clad man into countless fragments amidst wild laughter, creating a horrifying and violent spectacle. Surprisingly, the bald man suddenly stopped with a bewildered expression and cried out about a pain in his neck, while the shopkeeper and Shin behind him asked in surprise, as if the recent killing spree had never happened or something was amiss. The striped-clad man couldn't hide his shock, wondering how his opponent could evade such a perfect technique without a single scratch, something he had never seen anyone accomplish before. The bald masked man ordered his accomplice to use their secret technique, boasting that their opponent was the third person honored to witness it, causing the old man with glasses and Shin to hold their breath and watch in astonishment. Without waiting for the enemy to make a move, Sakamoto, quick as lightning, used a frying pan to smash directly into the bald man's head, causing him to collapse on the spot before the stunned gaze of his long-haired accomplice. The enraged masked assailant charged forward, slashing and injuring the shopkeeper's leg, but the old man still managed to use his half-cooked frying pan to block the attack, sending sparks and food scattering. The masked figure was utterly horrified to realize his superalloy chakram had shattered into pieces, while the stout man holding the pan also couldn't believe his eyes at the force of the recent impact. Shin frantically examined the elderly chef's hand after the impact, while Sakamoto cursed in annoyance, fed up and walking away, unwilling to deal with these two lunatics any longer. Lu Xiaotang recoiled in terror as Sakamoto's muscular dark arm suddenly reached out, attempting to seize her by a hair's breadth. Shin tightly bound the black-haired father with a rope, gritting his teeth as he declared that he had heard everything clearly, leaving him no chance to deny it. Counterattacking unexpectedly, Dark Shin delivered a powerful kick that sent the assassin flying into the air, leaving him no time to react. While the long-haired bound person writhed, trying to escape, the old man with glasses showed no mercy, pushing an entire giant refrigerator straight into him with the refrigerator impact technique. Lu Xiaotang was utterly horrified to witness the victim lying motionless in a crimson pool with a severe head injury, stammering out the words, "robot machine," in fear. Amidst the rubble, the shopkeeper casually picked up a strange red creature to taste, wondering about its origin, while his two companions watched with expressions of weariness and confusion.